Hey everybody out there, my name is Tommy and this is my channel, Counting on the Big Sleep, and we are back hanging out at the lake, enjoying a beautiful sunny spring day. Just got back from taking my son to his physical therapy. That's it, physical therapy. He has some back problems. I'm taking him to physical therapy. I'll be taking him for a while. But yeah, it's another gorgeous day out here. See some people out here fishing. There's some geese roaming around. It's in the mid 70s in the great state of Illinois. You know, let me just give you a view of what I see. Just beautiful day out there. Look at it, barely any clouds in the sky. You know, got some wind blowing, help keep you cool. Got a guy over here fishing, people over there picnicking, geese walking around. Just gorgeous, beautiful day. Beautiful day today. All right. So, what should we talk about today? So, let's see. How about let's tell you? I can tell you a story of how I grew up. And the differences between us and Gen Z. My son's a Gen Z, and there's a big difference between us. And I've noticed a big difference in between a lot of Gen Zs. The Zoomers. Maybe it's every generation that thinks that they don't understand the previous one or the next one. Yeah, I don't understand half the things that he does or his friends do. I mean, we just grew up differently. I grew up running around, playing tag, playing hide and go seek, trying to keep away from predators, because there was plenty of them around, that's for sure. I can tell you a story about that in a little bit. But yeah, they're just different. I mean, they grew up more on. Well, Jake was outside when he was younger. But now he's mostly inside a lot on the computer, playing video games. Just living online, basically. I think he's done much more harm than any good. But I don't know. The next generation that comes after that, I can't remember what they're called, but hopefully they'll be better. Won't have someone. He has a lot of mental stress for someone his age. I mean, I remember having mental stress when my early. I mean, I have mental stress all the time, but just not like he does and stuff. I worry about the kid. I worry about him. But we just grew up differently. Very differently, actually. I mean, my father died when I was 5, and all my brothers and sisters all moved away, so it was me and my mom. And I remember one of the very first places that we moved to. I think I was around 6 or 7. Moved to this apartment complex, and it was full of party people, because when I would be coming home sometimes at nighttime, there would be some drunk guy on the doorstep of our apartment building, and I'd always have to step over him. It's always weird because I've had to grow up seeing a lot of this stuff and just keep on going through it, like drunk people on the floor. I mean, I've grown up with, I mean, I'm used to it. I've been used to it for a long time. People on street corners asking for money, people sitting down. I kind of grew up seeing, stuff, the beginnings of that stuff, so. But yeah, we moved to an apartment complex, and my two very first friends that I ever met were two black kids. They were my very first friends. They were named Derek and Eric. And Eric was the youngest one, and Derek was the older one. And their mom was a single mom. Oh, Lord. And she was a big woman, too. Big woman. Nice. I spent that night at their house. They'd spend that at my house, you know. I knew them for about, you know, we moved every year. I was there for about a year, you know. I played with them and stuff. I got along great. Had no problem. But their mom was really, really strict. Oh, man. She was strict. I remember one time the two brothers were out in the hallway arguing with each other, and Derek was arguing with, Eric, and Eric was like, dude, let's not argue, let's not fight, we're gonna wake mom, what happens to that, all of a sudden you would hear his mother scream, and Eric would just start crying because he knew he was in for a beating. I mean, she would beat these kids. I mean, if they got out of line, I mean, she'd use anything. He'd tell me she'd use extension cord and whip his ass, So he did not like to argue and fight, with his brothers or anything or try and get in trouble, because she was very, very strict. They were great kids. They stuck up for me, when I got picked on. I got nothing but love for those guys. I hope they turned out great. But yeah, they were my first two, like kind of real friends, and they were two black kids, which is kind of weird, because I'm not saying, I got nothing against black people or Mexican people or anything like that, I've grown up with diverse amounts of different types of people, in my life, Hell, man, I even tried to date a black girl one time, which was good, she was gorgeous, but a lot of other people did not like it, and one of them was my boss from work, and it's weird back then, it was weird, it was a little weird, because, at the company I worked for, most of the black people worked the machines, and then the white people were the ones loading the trucks. So there was a sort of the division thing. And then once I crossed into that division, because I used to start, I was taking her to lunch and stuff. We were going out to lunch, talking all the time. And once my boss found out, and other people found out, she heard about it a lot. She was getting, bitched at. I was getting bitched at, so we decided, just to be friends, and it's cool. And I kind of, kept it a little separate, yeah. But yeah, back then, I'm not saying it was a long time ago. I'm 58 now, but it was, a good, 30 years ago, 40 years ago maybe, and it's still like that today too, probably. I don't know. It might be like that today. But that's one of the things that kind of shaped me into the kind of person I am. I really don't have anything against anybody else. As long as you're not trying to hurt me, I'm not trying to hurt you. But yeah, it's creepiness. But yeah, there's been a lot of creepiness when my growing up too. But a lot of good people. It was hard for me to trust people, especially when I kind of went through this traumatic experience, when I was I was younger. I had lived by this kid who was older than I was. He was around 16, 17. I was maybe like 7, But he was like our neighbor and stuff, and he would come over. And he would take me to the park and stuff, and he would talk about sexual things with his girlfriend and stuff, and it got kind of real creepy and stuff. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. I remember the first time I met him, and my mom introduced me to his family, and his stepdad was there. And he's like, "Oh yeah, my son, he's in the garage there. We're going to talk to him." I said, I went and introduced myself, and the first thing he asked me is like, "Hey, man, you want a blowjob?" I'm like, "What?" Hey, I'm 7 years old. I mean, I don't know what a blowjob is. I'm like, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, no, I don't want it from you. No, I have no guidance. So I was like, no, no, no. He's like, oh, I can give him as good as I get him, and I'm like, and I just remember just turning around and walking away, and I was like, what? I was feeling very confused about what's going on here. But ever since then, I mean, when we lived, he would come over sometimes, and whenever he would come over, he would say little innuendo things about sexual things, and I just remember having to lock my door, anytime he was over, and stay in my room and stay away from him, because that was just too creepy. And then it didn't, yeah. I remember about right before we moved about 2 or 3 months before we moved. He ran away from home. Him and his stepdad didn't get along very well. There was something terribly wrong with that family. I mean, there's something wrong with our family too. No doubt about it. But there was something really wrong going on there. I don't know what it was, But yeah, when he started saying stuff like that to me, and I didn't know what, like I said, some 7, maybe 8 at the time. I don't know what sex is or anything like that. I don't know what that is. I'm just a little fucking kid playing with my dog. you know, and but yeah, that was the very first creepiest incident that happened when I was younger. That kind of shaped me into, realizing that not all people have your best interest. That's for sure. People have alternative motives, and you really do have to be careful with, who you meet with and hook up with. You never know. You never really know. So, but yeah, that's just one of the times I've been, I've been hit on by more gay men than I've been hit on by women, to be honest with you. Well, I don't know, but maybe not. I've been hit on by a few gay men, and it's weird. It's a little weird. It's not that I got nothing against people being gay. It's just that I'm not gay, and it makes me, and sex stuff makes me uncomfortable. It really, especially when it involves, some weird stuff. Two guys together. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't like being touched. I never have. I don't know. Maybe it's some of the things that shape me. Maybe it's because stepping over drunk people trying to get into my apartment. When I was a little kid. Maybe it's the creepy next door neighbor who was, kind of hitting on me for some kind of weird reason, kind of trying to shape me into something. You learn not to trust people. You just learn not to trust. But there are people in my life that I do trust. Of course. I have family members I do trust. But yeah, that's just a little story about how I grew up and stuff. That's just one of the couple of things that has shaped me into the person I am. Oh, but it is a gorgeous day out here today, and thank God I have survived as long as I have, even though I've been up and down in depression, and up and down with work and stuff. But another day. I'm glad to be alive, and that's a little bit of a story about my childhood. I'll tell some more. Maybe next time when I do a video, I'll tell more. If you have any questions or anything, like I said, I'm 58. I am Gen Z. My son is I'm sorry. I am Gen X. I am Generation X, and my son is Gen Z. And he's a Zoomer, I guess what they call it. But that generation, I don't know. If you're part of Gen Z, let me know how you're doing. Because I found a lot of kids his age with severe mental illness and a lot of different, types of phobias. It just seem, just different than what, what we were. But I'm going to leave you with another gorgeous scene of what I'm looking at today, and thank God and bless God that I am alive today, so I can. Gorgeous, gorgeous area. Pan around a little bit for you. Like I said, we're at the lake at the woods today. I don't want to, show people, but there are some people out here fishing and stuff. Let's look at the sky up there. Barely any clouds. Gorgeous day here in Illinois. Alright, everybody. You have a blessed day, and I will talk to you soon.